It's the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to what is going to be a brief Mike Francesa podcast. As usual, brought to you by the good folks at Casamigos Tequila. It's brought to you by those who drink it. Now, here's what this is about. Last night, I'm sitting in my office. Harrison comes in. He had been in the city. He had been at that Fanatics thing. And he goes, Dad, you have to put out a thing with the you have to put out a list somewhere. And you can do a podcast or whatever. You have to put out your top 5 all-time Yankee list. And I'm going, what are you talking about? He goes, I said, it's not even an exciting list. It's a no-brainer. I mean, it's probably one of the least debatable lists of all time. And he goes, no, you don't understand. People are, like, clamoring for it. I'm getting asked for it. Look, how many things were you sent? And I look, and there's a bunch of them, people asking me for it, sending me texts and everything else. And I gather somehow he goes, it's become a huge hot issue today. It got into a big debate in a couple of places. You got to do it. I said, all right. So finally today, I said no last night. And finally today I said yes. So here's the bottom line. I understand now after hearing today that there was some debate between the dog and Stephen A. Smith about this, and a debate a couple other places about this. I told you this past week I was getting stuff about who was better, Mantle or Judge. And I said, I got asked this way a couple places. Is Judge better than Mantle? And I put, no. Exclamation point. And he's not yet. But he is obviously putting forth some very interesting numbers. And if they continue, far into the future, he is going to be a force to reckon with. But he's not anywhere near there yet. Now, let me just do the list. All I'll tell you is that eventually Judge might wind up becoming the number 5 guy on this list. The 4 guys on this list, okay, who are 1, 2, 3, 4, are not debatable. If anybody doesn't have them on their list, just ignore them. Don't even argue with them because they're not worth arguing with. They don't have any intelligence when it comes to this subject if they don't have these 4 on there, okay? Any list of Yankee all-time greats starts with Babe Ruth, okay? If you don't have Babe Ruth 1, then I wouldn't even waste my time arguing with you. You're not worth arguing with. There's no argument. There is no argument about him in any way with anybody except him being number 1. He was so far and away the best player that it's not even debatable. So he's 1. On any list you will find, any credible list, he will be first. Then comes Gehrig. Gehrig will be anywhere from 2 to 4 on any list. His numbers are amazing. His RBI numbers, insane. Then will come Mantle. Mantle sneaks ahead of DiMaggio because DiMaggio only played 13 years. He was hurt by the war. He missed 3 years during the war years. If you go by his first 5 years, he was on his way to maybe being one of the best players, if not the best player of all time. He could have even been considered right below Ruth. No one can go above Ruth. But that's how good his first 5 years were. He was never the same player, but he really put up sensational numbers for his time. He was a great fielder. He now comes in on these all-time lists somewhere around 15 to 20 based on where you put him. Mantle usually comes in somewhere between 7 and 10. So you have Ruth 1, Gehrig somewhere between 2 and 4, Mantle somewhere between 7 and 10. This is on the all-time player list, not the all-time Yankee list. And then you have DiMaggio. So you have 4 guys in the top 15, 16 players. There's no debate about any of the 4. Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, DiMaggio, immortal. They're on anybody's top 20 of all time. Most times they're inside the top 15. If you go to most lists, like I said, Ruth is 1, Gehrig somewhere between 2 and 4, Mantle somewhere between 7 and 10, and DiMaggio inside usually 15 or 16. Now, the question is, who's the 5th? Some people want Mariano. The problem is, when you look at all-time lists, most people consider relievers a specialty. They don't play all the time. Closers only play in a portion of the games. They don't pitch a lot of innings based on how many innings the season is. So they considered specialists. They don't get a lot of credence on those lists. Starting pitchers get less than regular players do, but they don't get a lot of credence. You could make the case Mariano's the best player at his position of all time. Hey, I would not put him 5. I would definitely put him in the top 10. Now, the guy who gets 5 right now is Yogi Berra. Why? Because he was a great clutch player. He was a catcher. He was a prolific winner. And won 3 MVPs, finished second a couple of times, finished third, might have finished in the top 5 at least 8 times. I know he had 3 wins and 2 twos. That's insanity for MVPs. That's how valuable he was. And he was an incredible clutch hitter. And whatever records Mantle doesn't hold for all-time World Series records, either Ruth holds it or Yogi Berra holds it. They hold all the all-time records for World Series. There's no one else. When you want to talk about an offensive record, guess Mantle, guess Berra, guess Ruth. You will hit it with one of the 3. You will most likely hit it with Mantle if you go first, because Mantle has the most homers, he has the most RBIs, he has the most runs scored. He is there at the top of all the, he had 18 home runs, the whole thing, okay? Ruth had incredible numbers. Ruth's OPS in the World Series was over 1.2 for his career, okay? The bottom line is this list is the easiest list. Yogi gets it over a Mariano or a Whitey Ford. He gets it over anybody else. And the guy making the move now is Judge, making the move towards, clearly going to land in the top 10 all time. Could land 5, the way things are going. The 1, 2, 3, 4 are untouchable. Untouchable. They are not to be argued. There is no debate. They are automatic. There should be the 2 things there should be no debate about. That the 1, 2, 3, 4 are sacrosanct. They are immortals. And that number 1 is so far and away Ruth that there is nothing. All you show is that you have no clue about the sport if he is not 1 by a mile. Okay? If you offer anybody else, you show that you know nothing about the sport. That's how dominant he was. Nobody has ever, and I'm not even getting into his pitching. Forget the pitching, even though his numbers were unbelievable and he broke records and set records as a pitcher. His offensive numbers in the 20s into the beginning of the 30s are so overwhelming. Okay, we look at guys, and if you know anything about the Hall of Fame or all-time list, you judge guys by how many black numbers they have, which means they led the league. Half his numbers are black for Ruth. Ruth has over 70 bold numbers on his lifetime statistics. 70. Okay, a great player a really great player has 25. A Mantle has 38, as an example. Ruth has 70. You'll find players who have none. He has 70. That's how unbelievable. When you look at his lifetime numbers, nobody even approaches him. There's nothing, zero, to discuss about him, the top 4, or really even anything about this list. And I think Yogi, right now, is a solid 5. I wouldn't say he's not debatable. I'll listen to arguments for somebody else. But I think he wins because he was a catcher. He was an incredibly good clutch hitter. He was a prolific winner and was a 3-time MVP and finished second, I think twice, and third once, if I remember at the top of my head. So, like I said, if you know anything about the Yankees or know anything about baseball, this top 5 list is a no-brainer. We'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.